Okay, I think we're live. Normally I like to talk about the Yosy of the day, but we're so pressed for time now because we're behind. I can't. But I just want to highlight what Shlomi Feintuch pointed out yesterday on the chat, that test that Chagai and Novi tested the Kohanim was on Chof Dalid Kislev, which is in fact today. So today was the day of the test. So today is a skula. If you hold like Shmuel, today is a skula to pass tests, to get 100 on your tests. If you hold like Rav, not so much. Okay, so what we have until now is really, yesterday we blew open the whole sugya. Everything became simple because we have this major machlokes. Rabbi Meir's involved, Rabbi Yehuda's involved, Rabbi Shimon's involved, Rabbi Yosy ben Yossi is involved. But it's all about, does mashkin become tamei midaraisa, and if it could become tamei midaraisa, can it be metama something else midaraisa? And we were talking for the last couple of days. Yes, no, we didn't know where it started from. Yesterday, the Gemara blew everything open, gave us the building blocks, and showed us where everything started from. And everything started, the whole sugya is all about one pasuk. One pasuk. Now, this pasuk, it's in Vayikra Yud Aleph, Lamed Daled. This pasuk talks about something that became tamei in the klicheres. So let's set up the incident. You had a klicheres, and the sheretz was in its avir. When the sheretz is in the avir klicheres, a sheretz which is an av makes the klicheres into a rishon. Now, something ended up in the cheres after whether the sheretz is there or not, it's irrelevant as long as the sheretz didn't touch anything other than the avir of the klicheres becomes a rishon. And if there's a piece of food, a chunk of meat in that klicheres, it will become tamei from the klicheres. It does not get a tuma directly from the sheretz if it didn't touch, so it only gets its tuma from the klicheres. The klicheres is a rishon, so it would make Michael inside it into a sheni. If there was and that's what this pasuk is talking about. Mikola oichel, asher achel. If there's any food in this klicheres that a sheretz was in, asher yavel of mayim, assuming that the oichel was already hukshel l'kabel tuma, yitma, the oichel will become tamei. So that's how we know right off the bat an oichel that's sitting here in a klicheres that was tamei, the oichel becomes a sheni. Then the next half of the pasuk says, "V'chol mashke asher yishte b'chol kli yitma," which would seem to say quite explicitly that if there's a mashke in the klicheres, it will become tamei. That would pose a great problem to the Manda Amar who holds that tumas mashkin is not midaraisa. So we learned this at the beginning of the sugya, and the Gemara ended up saying that this v'chol mashke asher yishte b'chol kli yitma is talking about hechsher. It's machsher, something to be makabel tuma, but it's not actually talking about the mashke becoming tamei. So we've already accomplished that we now understand how the people who learn that there is tumas mashke midaraisa, where they get it from. They get it from this pasuk, v'chol mashke asher yishte b'chol kli yitma. And those who hold that mashke cannot become tamei midaraisa, we learned that they will interpret this pasuk as referring to water just being machshir, other things l'kabel tuma. Now let's talk about the Tanoim who hold that mashke could be mitama other things midaraisa. So we learned, it says mikola oichel asher yachel asher yavel of mayim yitma. This is talking about food. Food will become tamei if it's in the klicheres. But it's interesting, why did the pasuk use the word yitma? And this is something that Rabbi Kiva raised. Rabbi Kiva raised this question. It should say mikola oichel asher yachel asher yavel of mayim tamei. Why does it say yitma? So Rabbi Kiva darshans that yitma is coming to teach us yitamei. Not only is it tamei, it can also be metama something else. So based on our calculations, we said that the keli became a rishon. It would make the food inside it into a sheni. But since it says yitamei, the food that became tamei can also be metama something else. It's proof positive that this Michael could be metama something else. The Gemara is going to tell us what it could be metama is not neither oichel, but it could be metama a mashkin. Yitamei could be metama something else, which means it could be metama a mashkin. Why can it not be metama and oichel just like it? Because if it really meant it could be metama anything, yitamei, it should have said yitamei. If it meant yitamei, it should have said yitamei. So we have dual mashmoisim. On the one hand, you can ask why doesn't it say tamei? It says yitma, which indicates it could be metama. It could be metama something else. But on the other hand, you can ask it should have said yitamei. So because of that, Rabbi Kiva learns yitamei. It will be able to be metama something else, but with a limitation. It can't be metama oichel like itself. It can only be metama mashkin, something else, not like itself. And we're going to see that clearly today on the base, although there is a little bit of a shaila about what Rabbi Kiva holds in Rashi. But that's what the Yitma Yitameh is. And the same thing with the mashka. V'chol mashka sheyishasa b'chol kli Yitma. Again, we would dash in Yitameh. That would be the makor. This would be the whole makor for all the people who hold that mashka could be metama something else. It's from this Yitma that we would dash in like Rabbi Kiva Yitameh. And again, the same deal. Since it says Yitma, it doesn't say Yitameh. It limits it to being metame a meichel, but not a mashke. So basically, a meichel could be metame a mashke could be metame a noichel, but not the other way around. So that's where we have now. We have a makor for everything that we need, everything that we need. The Gemara also discusses why you don't extend the tumah that a mashkin can give off to kalim, or why don't you extend the tumah that a meichel can give off to kalim. And that's what we discussed. There are kal v'choimers that prove that you will not be able to be metama kalim. You're only able to be metama either an oichel being metama mashka and a mashka being metama an oichel. Important to note that if you make this drush of yitamei and you learn that midoraisa a mashka could be metama something else, you're going to have to, by definition, say that a shlishi by chulin is possible to happen, because this is speaking about chulin. And if the yitamei, if the mashka inside this keli, this klicheres, is only a sheni, because it became because the keli is a rishon, it makes then the oichel or the mashka into a sheni. If that sheni midaraisa could be yitamei, could be mitama something else, it's going to have to make it into a shlishi, and that's going to pose a little bit of a problem to Rabbi Yosy, because the mainstream, besides Rabbi Kiva, nobody holds that there's something called a shlishi l'tuma by chulin. We hold it a shlishi l'tuma by truma, but not by chulin. And this yitamei, based on Rabbi Kiva's teaching, would indicate that there's a shlishi l'tuma by chulin. So we're in the middle of analyzing these psukim using the Rabbi Kiva method. So far, we've discussed in detail the second yitma of mashka, and we elaborated on where Rabbi Yosy or Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Shimon would know that mashka could be matama. Now the Gemara is going to go back to the first yitma, which is the yitma that really Rabbi Kiva was talking about. Because when Rabbi Kiva talked about the sheni oisha shlishi, he was focusing on the yitma by Michael. And that's where we're up to right now, where the Gemara asks, yitma dereisha hechi darish. How did Rabbi Kiva darshan, how did he analyze the yitma that's referring to an oichel that's going to be matama something else? So it says mikala oichel asher yachel asher yove olav maim yitma. So he darshans it yitamei l'tamei esamashkin.
What does yitma actually mean?
It will be tamei.
Will be tamei. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says it will be tamei, but we're saying it doesn't really mean that. It means something else.
No, we're saying it will be tamei, but we're saying that it also indicates, Zok Rabbi Kiva, that not only is it tamei, it can also be mitama something else.
Oh, both. I see. So
Okay.
It's not just a hechsher. He's not saying it just means it's a hechsher tamei.
No. Anybody who holds that a mashkin is tamei midaraisa, which seems to be the majority of the Tanoim, will have to learn yitma means it's tamei, and it's not talking about hechsher. The Mandamer who held there is no tumah of mashkin midaraisa, he had to a little bit of a kvetch the pasuk, because if you read the pasuk in its simplest form, it seems to say that it's tamei, not machsher. It was a little bit of a doichik to answer that the pasuk only means hechsher.
Mr. Zalman?
Yes.
It seems from the way you explained it that the word yitamei, it will become tamei or it will be tamei, is
Yitamei means it will be mitama something else. Yitamei means it will be mitama something else. Yitma means it will be tamei.
Even yitma, it will be tamei, could still be considered an ambiguous lashon, and that's how Rabbi Akiva can say that it could be mitama something else. No.
Yitma is indeed an ambiguous.
Hey, what happened?
Something else, the Torah should have said tamei. And if the Torah wanted to say it could be mitama something else, the Torah should have said yitamei. The Torah picked the word yitma, which is sort of in the middle.
Are they Are they spelled the same way?
Yud Tes Mem Aleph, correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you know which one the Torah meant then, if they're spelled the same way?
No, we say that. How do we know that it's Yitam? That it really says Yitma, not Yitamei? That's Alpi Kabbalah, from generation to generation. The Nakudos, the Torah doesn't have Nakudos. If it did, it would be so much easier to be a Balkaira. So the Torah does not have Nakudos. So that I think all of our Nakudos are from Kabbalah, I would assume. Unless when Moshe Rabbeinu brought down the Torah, it was an art scroll and it had the Nakudos in it, but likely not. Okay, I mean we don't know.
I'd like to know. I'd like to know.
I want to know. 40 days and 40 nights, the whole Torah. You never know. There might have been some art scroll there. Who knows?
Yeah, I'd like to know how we explain this to Aaron, because he had to know as soon as he came down the second time from Har Sinai, they started to build the Mishkan. So they had all this time that he was teaching Aaron the Hilchas Tumim v'Tahara, right? And it's no wonder that Aaron's sons didn't do stuff right. So it's very complicated.
So you think the Kaihanim that flunked Chaggai's test, it wasn't the first time they flunked?
No, okay. So they had 70 years. They're coming back after 70 years. So it's not surprising that they flunked.
I hear. Okay, so let's see what Rabbi Kiva says. So hey Chidarish, Yitamei Shechelish, Mikol Eichel Sheyachol Sheyabel of Mayim Yitma. Yitamei, we dash in Yitamei, Litamei es a mashkin, that Michael could be Metame mashkin. Ata Omer. So Michael being Metame mashkin means the Michael of the Sheni will make the mashkin into a shlishi. Ata Omer Litamei es a mashkin. Is that what the pasuk is teaching us? Oy Einoi Ella Litamei es a keli. Maybe the pasuk when it says Yitamei by Michael is that it could be Metame Akeli. Amrit Kal V'chomer. Let's say a Kal V'chomer. Just yesterday, we proved without a shadow of a doubt that a mashka cannot be Metame Akeli. So once we've established that and we have that anchor, let's build from there. Uma mashka shemetama oichel. A mashka can be Metame an oichel. Nevertheless, eine Metame kli. It cannot be Metame Akeli. So oichel, which is even weaker than a mashka, she'ein Metame oichel. An oichel cannot be Metame another oichel. Einoi din shelo Yitame kli. So surely it cannot be Metame Keli. If a mashka cannot be Mekabel Keli, which is a chomer, an oichel, which is a kal, surely should not be able to be Metame Keli. Hama ani mekayim yitma or yitamei. What else is the Torah referring to that this machal can be Metame if it cannot be Metame a Keli? Letame is a mashkin. It must be a mashkin. So if you think we only really have three choices, it could either be an oichel, a mashkin, or kelim. It can't be an oichel. It can't be an oichel because an oichel is not Metame an oichel. It can't be a keli because we just proved it. So it's a mashkin. But the Gemara adds in why mashkin? She'in alulin lekabel tuma. Mashkin are more susceptible to being mekabel tuma. And the Gemara is going to tell us the reason in a moment. The reason is because mashkin could become tummy even if they weren't huchsher lekabel tuma. So, frank the Gemara, my irya mashkin mishum de alulin lekabel tuma. Why are you telling me that what the Michael will be able to be Metame has to be mashkin, and the reason for it is because mashkin is most susceptible to be Mekabel Tumah. Typically, mishum de lekamida achrina. Why don't you say the reason why the Torah must be referring to mashkin when it says that a Michael could be Metame, must refer to mashkin, is because we ran out of choices. It's a process of elimination. It's not a keli, it's not a Michael. It's got to be a mashka. It's like an election in Russia. You have one party to vote for. So of course you're going to vote for that party. So here too, if Kalim are out and Michael is out, by definition it has to be mashka. So why did the Gemara have to add in this extra svara of mashkin is a lul in the kabel tumah? So it's Hachi Kamar. That's referring to the kabel chomer we made. How did we prove that a Michael could not be Metame Keli? It was a kabel chomer. Madich mashka, which is very powerful. Tama oichel ain't Metame Kli. Oichel, which is weaker. She'ein Metame oichel, it cannot be Metame oichel. Ein edin shelo Yitame Kli. So on that the Gemara asked, "V'chitei oichel chomer." You're saying an oichel is kal because an oichel can't be Metame an oichel, but an oichel also has a chomer over a mashkin. And what is that? The Metame mashkin. An oichel could be Metame mashkin, and a mashkin cannot be Metame mashkin. So since in a certain aspect an oichel can do what a mashkin cannot do, maybe an oichel can also be matama keli. Netamulikli, Dr. Gemara, that an oichel could be matama mashka is not indicative of the fact that the tumas oichel is chomer and therefore it could affect others. Rather, hahu chomer de mashkanu. That's because it's a weakness of the mashkin which is accepting the tumah. So even though the tumas oichel is not strong, it could still infect a mashkin because a mashkin has a weak resistance to tumah. Mishum the mashkin alulin lekabel tumah. The fact that a Michael Kibitama Mashka is not indicative of the fact that the Tumas Michael is strong. It's indicative of the fact that a Mashka can be Makabal Tuma easier. It's more susceptible to be Makabal Tuma. Why is it more susceptible to be Makabal Tuma? So now we've covered one more step. Rabbi Kiva learns that a Michael that became Tamei with a Sheni, became a Sheni Latuma, it could now be Metama a Mashka. It can make the Mashka into a Shlishi. It cannot be Metama Keli, and it cannot be Metama Michael. Now, we mentioned as in passing that this Michael could not be Metama Michael, but we never really clearly said where that comes from. Now we're going to tackle that. Yitma, the Ein Oisa Kayotzeba. Yitma teaches us that a Michael cannot make a Michael, which is similar to it, Tomei, can only make a Mashka Tomei. And Rashi elaborates, based on what I explained earlier, that it should have, if it really meant it could be Matama anything else, the Pasuk should have said Yitamei. Didn't say Yitamei. So that would mean that even though the Michael can be Matama something else, there's limitations on that. And the limitations are that it cannot be Matama Kayotzeba, a Michael cannot be Matama Michael, it could only be Matama Amashka. Frankly, more this limud, that a Michael cannot be Matama Michael, we've been there before. We learned it before from a different pasuk, and this actually is requoted from the Gemara on Yudal Amud Aleph when all this sugya started. So, mehacha nafka, are you saying that we're learning it up from Yitma? Now, remember, what is the context of the Yitma in our sugya? It's a Michael that became Tamei because it was found in the Klicheres that was a Rishon. So, is this the makar to the fact that it cannot be Matam another Michael? Mehacha nafka, we actually learned it from a different pasuk, which speaks about a sheretz directly touching a Michael. And the pasuk says, if you have a Michael that's hukshel lekabel tuma and a sheretz touches it, tamei hu. It is tamei. The Michael alone that touches the sheretz is tamei, and of course the sheretz is an av, so the Michael would become a rishon. And since it says tamei hu, it doesn't just say tamei. We dash in hu tamei. It itself is tamei. This Michael becomes tamei. It's a rishon tuma. The ein oisa tuma kayotzeba. Although it could make tuma, but it cannot be metama food just like it. So kum techais, we have the pasuk directly when the sheretz directly touched a Michael to teach us that this Michael could not be metama another Michael. And then we have the Yitma in our sugya, which talks about the Michael that didn't touch the sheretz, but it was in a keli that was a rishon and became a sheni. And we have the Yitma there also telling us that this food cannot be metama other food. Why do we need two psukim? So our Yitma is talking about. I'm sorry. The other sugya is talking about mashkin aboy machmas sheretz, mashkin that was directly touched by the sheretz, and therefore it became a rishon l'tuma. The chad the mashkin in our sugya is talking about mashkin aboy machas kli. We're talking about mashkin that only became tamei in the keli of in the klicheres that became tamei from the sheretz. So it's one level down. It's a sheni. Utrichi. I actually need the Torah to teach us in both places that it cannot be matama kayotzeboy. The yashmin b'mashkin haboy machmas kli. If the Torah would have only told us in our case, where you have this mashkin that's a sheni, that it cannot be matama another mashkin, I would have said mishum d'lo chamiri. We're talking about a sheni l'tuma. It's 2 steps away from the sheretz itself. Al b'mashkin haboy machmas sheretz. But if you have a mashkin that's a rishon, because it touched the sheretz directly, the chamiri, maybe it would be able to be matama a similar product, a mashka, and a Michael. So that's why I need both. Frankly, more that doesn't explain why I need both. Just tell us the more chomer one. Even if the mashkin directly touched the sheretz, so it's a rishon, or the Michael directly touched the sheretz and it's a rishon, even that cannot be matama kayotzeba. The kol shekain mashkin aboy machmas kli. And I would surely know that if the mashka is only a sheni, for sure it can't be matama kayotzeba. So why do I need our yitma the Tomei who, by the case of the sheretz touching the meat directly, would have covered us all. Dr. Gemara, you're right. We always like trying to show how everything is relevant, but sometimes we fail. Milsa, the Asher B'Kavachomer, Torach B'Kasav Lakra. We always like to show there's a chiddush in each word, but sometimes the Torah, if you cannot find any chiddush, you can revert to the saying that the Torah holds, even though we would have figured it out anyway with the Kavachomer, the Torah likes to say it explicitly. I for sure understand why in Hilchos Tumah the Torah wants to be explicit, because it's confusing enough even with the Torah saying it explicitly. Okay, so now we've covered Rabbi Akiva, which is beautiful, that Sheni or Shlishi and the Mashka could be Mitama something else, and how in order for Rabbi Yosy to hold that a Mashka could be Mitama something else, with Daraisa, you would have to be relying on this diuk of Yitma Yitame of Rabbi Akiva. Amalei Ravina Ravashi. So how could you say that this is Rabbi Shimon Svara and Rabbi Yosy Svara? The Amar Rava Lo Rabbi Yosy Savala Rabbi Akiva, Lo Rabbi Akiva Savala Rabbi Yosy. We actually had Rava who said that Rabbi Yosy does not hold like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold like Rabbi Yosy, and Rabbi Yosy doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Yosy does not hold like Rabbi Akiva. He doesn't hold of this Yitma Yitame. He doesn't dash from this Yitma Yitame, and we're going to show you why he cannot in a moment. And Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold like Rabbi Yosy. We're going to soon see what Rabbi Yosy said that Rabbi Akiva cannot agree with. But since we know Rabbi Yosy does not agree with Rabbi Akiva, how could Rabbi Yosy use the Yitma Yitame as a makar that Mashkin is Matama Midaraisa? He doesn't hold to this limit of Rabbi Akiva. So Gemara, you're right. Amar lei Rabbi Yosy b'shitas Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Amra v'lei loisvirlei. In fact, this whole Rabbi Yosy in the Brisa that said that a mashka could be matama something else, that wasn't really his own opinion. He was just saying, according to my Rabbi Akiva, who I happen to disagree with, he would hold that a mashka could be matama something else midiraisa. Me personally, a mashka cannot be matama something else midiraisa. I don't make this diik from yitma yitame. So now we're going to get into the details. But now we're going to learn what Rabbi Yosy said that shows Rabbi Akiva doesn't agree with him, and what Rabbi Akiva said that, or how we know that Rabbi Yosy disagreed with Rabbi Akiva, disagreed with this Yitma Yitame. So Amalei Ravashi Rav Kahana, Bishlama Rabbi Yosy lo'savalak Rabbi Akiva. I understand why Rabbi Yosy cannot agree with this limud of Yitma Yitame. The Tanya, Rabbi Yosy, Minayin l'Revi b'Kodesh shu posel. We all know that Revi by Kodeshim is posel if meat that's kachim touches a shlishi, that meat can no longer be eaten. It's got to be burnt. Vidinu and pashas it's midaraisa. Vidinu. We learn it from a kal v'chomer. And let's analyze this kal v'chomer. Uma mechutza kippurim. What is a mechutza kippurim? A mechutza kippurim is someone like a yoledes who was toivel after her 7 days l'zachar or 14 days l'kev. She toiveled, and she waited till the end of the day. So she toiveled and she waited till the next day. The only thing that's missing, that's preventing her from eating karbanis, from being Isaac and Kachim, is the karbanis that she's going to bring after her Yomei Tahira. That's the only thing standing in between her and karbanis, her and being able to be Isaac and Kachim. So she's called a Mechusar Kippurim. She has not yet brought her carbon. So she is mutter b'truma. Someone who's Mechusar Kippurim may eat truma. Nevertheless, pasul b'kodesh. If she touches kachim, she's not allowed to eat kachim. And if she touches kachim, she'll make the kachim puzzle. So therefore, shlishi shapuzzle b'truma. Shlishi, which is even worse than the mechusar kippurim, because shlishi, if it's a truma of shlishi, is puzzle. You'd have to burn that truma. Einay din sheyasa revi b'kodesh. Surely it should be able to make a revi b'kodesh. So we need to absorb and digest this kal v'chomer, because at first glance it doesn't seem to make sense. So let's start again. Madach mechusar kippurim. Shemuter b'truma. A mechusar kippurim may eat truma. Nevertheless, pasul b'kodesh. If a mechusar kippurim touches kachim, that kachim will become pasul. So shlishi shepasul b'truma. Shlishi, which is even pasul b'truma. So clearly, a shlishi l'tuma is worse than the mechusar kippurim. Ein adin sheyaser revi b'kodesh. It should be able to make a revi b'kodesh. Now, the reason why this is problematic is because we know we have a rule when it comes to kal v'chomers. Dayoy lavoy min adin liyos kanidoy. You could never learn from the source something that doesn't even exist by the source. So if if our engine here is the shlishi, possible truma, if that's the chaymer, How could you learn from there that it will make a Revi B'Kodesh? You don't see Revi B'Kodesh anywhere. Even the Shlishi can't make a Revi B'Kodesh. So this will be subject to the rule of Dayoy Lovim and Leis Knidain. You could never learn more from the Shlishi than the Shlishi itself. So there's a difference of opinion between Rashi and Tosfos how to deal with this. I'm going to stick to Rashi. Rashi says that there's a rule. Normally, you say Dayoy Lovim and Leis Knidain, but if it's going to undermine the entire Kal V'chomer and you won't be able to learn anything at all, then you don't say Dayoy. So therefore, here, to learn that there's a Shlishi B'Kodesh, I don't need this Kal V'chomer. So therefore, if I make this Kal V'chomer and I limit it to a Shlishi, then I knock off the whole Kal V'chomer. So therefore, you don't say Dayoy, and therefore you could learn and extend Revi B'Kodesh, even though there is no Revi by Truma. And this will be the Makar that Revi, it will passel a Kachim. Now, this is only based on the fact that I already know Shlishi. So Zokt the Gemara, V'lamadnu Shlishi B'Kodesh Min HaTorah. I already know that Shlishi will passel Kodesh. Since I already know that without the Kal V'chomer, the only thing that the Kal V'chomer can be adding is the fact that by Kachim, the Tumah level goes one step further, it goes to Revi, and therefore Revi mi Kal V'chomer. So the significance of what Rabbi Yosy is teaching us is that Rabbi Yosy came up with a Kal V'chomer that whatever we know by Truma, we can automatically extend the Tumah by Kachim one step higher or one step lower to Revi. Rashi also tells us that we also would make this a similar Kal V'chomer by Chulin. Whatever we know to be Tumah by Chulin, we will extend it one step further by Truma. So the last level of Tumah that I could prove Min HaTorah that exists by Chulin, and let's say that's a Sheni, with a Kal V'chomer, I can prove that the Truma is one level up, which will go to a Shlishi, and then with this Kal V'chomer, I can prove that Kachim is even one level above that, which is a Revi. So now, before we even finish the dissecting Rabbi Yosy, let's think of what the ramifications of this Kal V'chomer is. If this Kal V'chomer teaches you that whatever we know as a base by Chulin, you can extend it to one level for Truma and two levels for Kachim, if Rabbi Yosy held like Rabbi Akiva, that you have Shlishi even b'Chulin, because Yitma Yitame tells us that even Chulin can make a Shlishi, so then this Kal V'chomer is going to prove that I can have a Revi for Truma, and I can have a Chamishi by Kachim. No one says that. So therefore, Rabbi Yosy, using his Kal V'chomer, once Rabbi Yosy subscribed his Kal V'chomer, that whatever I know by Chulin, I extend it to one level by Truma and two levels by Kachim, if he holds that Chulin could be a Shlishi, it's going to get him into trouble because it's going to extend the Tumah of Kachim to Chamishi. And that's for sure not true. So it's for that reason we know, since Rabbi Yosy made this Kal V'chomer, we know Rabbi Yosy could not agree with Rabbi Akiva and will not hold that you dash in Yitame. He will not hold that you can have a Shlishi by Chulin, and therefore a Mashkin will not be able to be Matama anything by Chulin. So that's how we know Rabbi Yosy cannot hold like Rabbi Akiva. Now let's delve a little bit more into this Kal V'chomer that Rabbi Yosy made. So let's just go back. Shlishi, possible truma. Shlishi, which is more chomer because it passes truma. It should even make one level of tumah more for kachim. Now we don't need a Kal V'chomer to teach us that Shlishi b'Kodesh passul, because that you already know in that Torah. Shlishi b'Kodesh from that Torah, and therefore Revi, Rabbi Yosy extends it to a Revi mi Kal V'chomer. So now the Gemara challenges Shlishi min HaTorah. How do you know? But by Kachim, there is something called Shlishi midaraisa, and therefore I don't need a Kal V'chomer to teach it to us. Ichsiv basar asher yiga b'chol tamei. This is once again a pasuk that we had earlier. Basar that touches anything that's tamei, loy the could not be eaten. So what is this b'chol tamei? Any meat of Kachim that touches any type of tumah, you're not going to be allowed to eat that Kachim anymore. Mi loy askinan the naga b'sheni. It's at least a sheni l'tumah, because we've verified without a doubt that this Michael or Mashka that's in the klicheres will be tamei. So clearly it's a sheni. So without a doubt, a shlishi will for sure be puzzled by kachim. And then Revi mikal v'chomer kidamrinan. And then Rabbi Yosy extends by kachim one extra level of tumah to Revi mikal v'chomer. So this is very, very Yosydistic, because we keep on rattling off that Sheni is by Chulin, and Shlishi is by Truma, and Revi is by Kodesh. Where do you know that from? It was all mysterious. Today, we unlocked another secret. The Makar of Revi Latuma, according to Rabbi Yosy, is all a Kal V'chomer. Because Midaraisa, you only see that Chulin could be a Sheni. Midaraisa, you only see that Kachim could be a Shlishi. And using the Kal V'chomer, we can extend Truma to Shlishi, and we can extend Kachim to Revi. So if anybody asks you, how do you know there's something called Revi B'Kodesh? According to Rabbi Yosy, it's a Kal V'chomer. A Kal V'chomer is Midaraisa.
Yosy, sorry. How do we know this pasuk is talking about that the bossa touched the sheni?
It says the Chal Tameh, anything that's Tameh. So if we look around and we see the different tumas that are discussed in the Torah, let's find the lowest level of tumah that we ever find in the Torah. From our pasuk of finding either a Michael or a Mashka inside a Klicheres, right? That was the two pasuk, the two Yitmas that we just discussed, are talking about a Klicheres that became Tameh from a Sheretz. The Klicheres became a Rishon. That Klicheres was Matama the Oichel inside it. So the Torah specifically discusses a case where there's a Sheni L'Tumah.
Right.
So we know for sure, nobody can argue that you don't see Sheni L'Tumah directly mentioned in the Torah, directly discussed. So therefore, the lowest level of Tumah that you can imagine is Sheni, and we learn that if Kachim touches any level of Tumah, Lo Yayachal, it can't be eaten. So that will tell us at least that a Shlishi L'Tumah by Kachim is going to be a problem. And then using the Kal V'chomer, we can push it and extend it to a Revi. Okay, so this is mamish mind opening, because now we're starting to understand the fundamentals. This sugya really gives us the fundamentals, all the building blocks, and the fundamentals of Tum and Tahira are all here in the sugya. Now we know the reason for everything. Now we're mamish experts. Anything in Tumah that someone asks us, we know where it comes from, and we can trace it directly back to the words inside the Torah. It's unbelievable. It opens it up. If you're going to suggest that Rabbi Yosy holds like Rabbi Akiva, that holds that there's a makar for shlishi l'tumah by chulin midaraisa, well then nisni nami revi b'truma, you can extend to a tumas revi by truma v'chamishi b'kodesh, and that's unheard of. Nobody holds there's something called a revi b'truma and the chamishi b'kodesh. So therefore, it must be that Rabbi Yosy disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, which means he doesn't dash in yitame, and therefore he has no makar at all that a mashka could be metame something else midaraisa. So at the end of the day, if we go back to our brisa, Rabbi Yosy got eliminated. He doesn't hold anymore that mashka could be metame midaraisa. Rabbi Yehuda, we weren't sure. The Gemara wasn't sure if he totally backed out of his position or not. Rabbi Meir for sure holds it cannot be metame anything midaraisa. And even Rabbi Yosy is straight to hold the mashka cannot be matama anything with deraisa. So it seems now that only Rabbi Akiva holds that mashka can be matama something else with deraisa, and maybe Rabbi Yehuda. But most of the Tanoim hold that a mashka can make something else tamei is strictly midrabanan. So Rava also made a comment that Rabbi Akiva cannot agree with the Kal V'chomer of Rava. Why not? Rabbi Akiva lo shavu Rabbi Yosy. Rava said that Rabbi Akiva cannot agree with the Kal V'chomer of Rabbi Yosy. Minalan, how do you know that? That's also an interesting piece of information. Where do you get it from? Amalei, it's very simple. Because if Rabbi Akiva held of Rabbi Yosy's Kal V'chomer, then Rabbi Akiva should hold that there's something called Revi L'Tumah for Truma and Chamishi L'Tumah for Kochim. And Zok the Gemara, Deloy L'Shtamit Tana, V'Lisni, Revi B'Truma V'Chamishi B'Kodesh. We have not found a single Tana anywhere in the Mishnayos that ever mentions that there's a Revi B'Truma or Chamisha B'Kodesh. No one ever says that. And there should be such a Mishnah somewhere that says it, and the Gemara should explain that Mishnah, the name of Rabbi Akiva, and we would be able to attribute that halacha to Rabbi Akiva. Since there's not a single Mishnah anywhere ever that mentions Revi B'Truma or Chamisha B'Kodesh, it's impossible that Rabbi Akiva held that. So the only way for Rabbi Akiva not to extend the Tumah of Truma to Revi and the Tumah of Kochim to Chamishi is if he argues on the Kal V'chomer that Rabbi Yosy made. And in fact, it's a very interesting Kal V'chomer, because how could he argue? So Rashi brings down that the Gemara in Sotah says that the Dor Achroin, eventually, future generations are going to come and say that there is no Revi B'Tumah by Kodesh, and there's no Shlishi B'Tumah for Truma. We know there are, right? We all know Revi by Kodesh and Shlishi B'Tumah. But eventually, there's going to be a Dor Achroin that's going to reverse that. And the way they're going to reverse it is they're going to knock off the Kal V'Chomer that Rabbi Yosy made. And how are they going to knock off the Kal V'Chomer that Rabbi Yosy made? Very simply. They're going to say that the Tful Yom, the Mechutza Kippurim, that we have the Kal V'Chomer from, that we're saying is less Chomerdik, that we're saying is less Chomerdik than the Shlish L'Tumah, it's not less Chomerdik, because all these people started off as an Avatumah. And since they're Avatumah, that's why they can passel Kachim. But you can't bring a raya from here that a Shlishi could make a Revi. So, Frank the Gemara. According to Rabbi Akiva, in fact, there is Revi and there's Chamishi, which is a very big, which is, according to Rabbi Akiva, if he held it a Kal V'Chomer, there would be Revi and Chamishi. You're saying that he doesn't hold it a Kal V'Chomer, and the way I know it is because no one ever said it. Frank the Gemara, you expect us to rely on Akula to say there's no Chamishi, there's no Revi, because nobody found it anywhere? That's a little bit of a shvacha raya. Just because no one ever found it, logic dictates that Rabbi Akiva would hold of a Revi and Chamishi. And therefore, it's how could you just say because you don't find it, it's not true? So therefore, Nofak Rab Ashi, V'Tamer Rab Kana, Dok V'Ashkach. I love this nusach of Nofak, Dok V'Ashkach. Where did he go? Where did he look? What do you mean he went? What do you mean Nofak? He went out to look. So the Mesivta Gemara on one of these, if anybody remembers, now we're in COVID, but if anybody remembers, after the late Ma'ariv in the Aguda at 9:45, you would find many Rebbeim would come from the Mesivta. We even have a Rebbe who in the morning comes, they come from the Mesivta, and they come from the Rebbe Kabbalah Yeshiva, and all the different Rebbeim, they come to the Aguda, they flock to the Aguda. And after Ma'ariv, when no one's looking, they have the Mesivta Gemara here, and they have the Arshgol Gemaras here, and they have all the other learning aids and the Charusas. What's that? Why don't they just get it over there and learn it over there? The teretz is, in those days, the Mishnayos were already written down. Why were they written down? Why did Rebbe write them down? Because people were forgetting. But that was the Hamoinam. The Choshev Talmid Chachamim, anybody who wore a kapata, he had to know the Mishnayos by heart. So could you imagine a guy is looking for a brisa and he can't find it, and he has to pull out an art scroll? He's devastated. So Novak, Dok Vashach, he went to the Aguda for 10 o'clock Ma'ariv, and after Ma'ariv, when nobody was looking, there he found it, because it was bizyonis to have to look into a Mishnayos in those days. It shows you don't know what you're talking about. It shows you're not married. So Novak Dok Vashach. So what you see is two things. A, is that's the right thing to do. If you don't know, bite your pride and go take that learning aid. But on the other end, don't be mefarsim. Do it in the Aguda. Don't do it in the Mesivta. And you see that Rav Ashi did the same thing. Novak Rav Ashi, they tell Rav Kana, Dok Vashach, they went to the Aguda after Ma'ariv, and they looked it up, Vashkach, and they found it. You see, you can find good things in that Aguda. And he found a raya, in fact, that Rabbi Akiva does not hold of Chamishi B'Tumah for Kodesh, nor does he hold of Revi B'Tumah for Truma. Hadatan, Hakli Mitzaref Shmasha B'Soicha L'Kodesh. If you have a big tray, imagine you have a big tray. Imagine I'm carrying out a tray and I'm serving by Aguda Kiddush. Chadei Shemenu Kekedem, serving food by a Kiddush. So I'm holding a tray, and it's a big tray. The tray is like 3 feet by 4 feet. And on one end of the tray, I have one bowl of kichel, and then all the other end of the tray, there's another bowl of kichel. They're not touching each other. What happens if someone Tomei touches one bowl of kichels? The fact that it's on one tray is going to connect everything, and the kichel on the other end of the tray is also going to become Tomei. When it comes to kachim, if you have multiple things in the tray, even if they're not touching each other, the fact that they're all in one tray makes them one. But it would not do that for truma. That's not relevant to our discussion, although the Gemara is going to get involved in it in a second. But what is relevant is v'haravi v'kodesh pasol v'shlishi v'truma. So here it says very explicitly in this brisa that revi v'kodesh not chamishi, shlishi v'truma not revi. Now we don't know yet who is the author of this Mishnah, but it's very, very explicit. This Mishnah is from the testimony of Rabbi Akiva. So you see clearly that Rabbi Akiva does not subscribe to Chamishi B'Kodesh. So therefore, he cannot agree with the Kal V'chomer of Rabbi Yosy. And now we're going to get into this sugya of could one keli be mitzarev ishmasha b'soicha l'kodesh. That now we learned. Hoitz of Rabbi Akiva added to this list of things that would become tamei in a tray: soiles, flour, katoris, levoina, gecholim, shemnagot full yoim b'miktsasan. If it's full yoim touched one end of the tray that had them, pasalas kulam, it would be matame the whole tray. And again, that's going back to the same. It's going back to the same halacha that the kli is mitzaref masha b'soicha. And then he said revi in chamishi loy, shlishi in revi loy. So you see very explicitly alma kasovar. Oh, sorry. So you see very explicitly what we needed to know. That Rabbi Akiva does not hold of chamishi latuma for kachim, nor does he hold of revi latuma for truma. So now the Gemara says from the fact that Rabbi Akiva includes things that are not maicholim. Levoina is not a Michael, the Cholim are not my Cholim, so they surely cannot contract Tuma Midairaisa. From the fact that Rabbi Akiva includes those, clearly he's only talking to Rabbanans. So therefore, Alma Kasover Tzirif to Rabbanan. Rabbi Akiva must learn that all the brises that we just quoted to discuss the fact that a tray makes everything one, and if you touch one end, it'll be Matama everything on the tray, that's a halacha de Rabbanan, because it's all talking about the Rabbanans. Now Rashi says, and this is important because it's going to come up later, Rashi says the way we know it's the Rabbanan, because it lists off Levoin and Gecholim, which are not foods. And foods, if they're not foods, how do they become Tomei? Tosfos actually disagrees, because Tosfos says the Gemara is going to tell us later that the Chavivos of Kachim will make something be able to be Makabal Tumah, even though it's not a food. So therefore, this would not be a raya that this is the Rabbanan. So Tosfos says the beginning of this brisa that our Gemara does not quote talks about the Efer HaPara. The Efer HaPara is for sure not a Michael, and it says that that can also become Tamei, and that's the indication that this is all Rabbanan. Reb Chanan holds that this halacha, that a tray joins everything for kachim and makes it into one, is actually halacha dairaisa. The Amar Tzir of Daraisa, Shneimar, Kaf Achas, Asar Azov, Malaya Kadaris. So it says Kaf Achas, Asar Azov, Akasav also, Kol Masha, Kaf Achas. The Torah says anything that's in a spoon is one. So when something is in some type of keli, the keli joins everything inside it and it acts as one unit. So therefore, if part of it became tamei, it is all tamei. And now we're getting into a brand new sugya, an interesting sugya, no longer as complicated as what we learned before. Imagine they're cutting open meat in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Azara, and they found a needle in the flesh of an animal. They're in the middle of cutting up the rib steak, and there's a needle in the rib steak. So the halach is shasakin vayadayim tahiris. The knife with which you were carving the meat, and your hands, which with you were touching it, will be tahar. Va'basar tamei, but the meat will be tamei. Ninta beferish, if the needle was found in a place where it doesn't smell so good, hakoil tahar, there's no tumah there. It's not a Michael. There's no tumah Michael. There's no tumah there. So let's just analyze this for a second at face value. You had a needle. We're saying it makes the basar tamei. So that means either we know the needle's tamei or we're choshed the needle's tamei. The needle here must be something that we're viewing as a source of tumah. Yet, when you touched that needle, it was probably wet there. Or if your knife touched that needle, it will not make the knife tamei. It will not make your hand tamei, even though we know there's tumas mashkim midrabanan. So why is it that your hand wouldn't become tamei if you touched this needle? Assuming that we're attributing tumah to it, the haraya, it's making the meat tamei. So Amar Rabbi Akiva, Zok Rabbi Akiva, Zachinu. Fortunately, she'ein tumas yadayim b'mikdash. We're fortunate that the Rabbanan wasn't gozer these tumas, the Rabbanan, that the mashka will be tamei your hands in the Beis Hamikdash. Because if they did, then you would have been metame everything, and it's not good to have too much tumah in the Beis Hamikdash because it'll cause too many problems. It'll passel too many things. The nema, Frank the Gemara, if you notice, the Brisa said not only are his hands not tummy, his kalim aren't tummy. The knife is not tummy. So why did Rabbi Akiva focus on the fortunate part that the Rabbanan weren't going to tumah on Yodayim in the Beis Hamikdash? The nema shein tumah Yodayim v'kalim b'mikdash. Why didn't Rabbi Akiva comment on the fact that he's happy as well that there was no tumas kalim in the Beis Hamikdash, because otherwise the knife would have become tummy. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Item Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina. Maybe when Rabbi Kiva made this comment, it was Yadayim Kodim Gezeres Kalim Nishti. Maybe when Rabbi Kiva made this comment, oh Baruch Hashem, there's no tumas Yadayim in the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe that was before they were Gozer Gezeres Kalim at all. So he couldn't say Baruch Hashem they weren't Gozer Gezeres Kalim in the Beis Hamikdash, because at that point they weren't Gozer Gezeres Kalim anywhere yet. Amar Rava, that doesn't make sense to say, because Vartarvayu Boy B'Yom Gozru, the Gezer of Kalim being Tamei and the Gezer of Yadayim being Tamei were both made on the same day. So it's unlikely to argue that Rabbi Kiva made this comment after the Gezer of Yadayim before the Gezer of Kalim. Titnan HaSefer Svarim are Tamei, and Rashi tells us the reason why we're going to tumah upon them because Svarim are holy, Truma is holy. So people would store their Svarim near their Truma. But guess what? Truma is so holy that Truma attracts mice. When mice come, they eat the Truma, but they taste the Svarim and they mess up the Svarim. So to prevent people from storing Svarim together with their Truma, they said that Svarim are Tamei, or Yadayim are Tamei. Tvul Yom, Rashi says, is a mistake. The Gemara takes it out because Tvul Yom is Dairaisa. The Oichlin, Va'kelim, Shenitnu b'mashkin, anything that became Tamei through a mashkin is Tamei midrabanan. So you see, they both happened the same day. So El Amarava Hanach L'Tumasakin. We're not talking about any Tumasakin over here. Ta'filu b'chulin nami loy metama. We're not speaking where there was any moisture involved. Everything was dry. So since everything was dry, there is no reason whatsoever to discuss any tum at all. And the reason why he said Baruch Hashem they weren't going to tum shadayim, the tum shadayim is tumah that didn't come from the fact that you touched this wet meat. Tum shadayim is the regular tumah that they were geyser, that when you don't wash your hands, it's automatically tumah even without coming into contact with tumah. That's something that's not paralleled by kalim. So it makes sense that Rabbi Kiva said Baruch Hashem they didn't make this extra tumah shadayim in the Beis Hamikdash. So now the Gemara wants to know how.
Now, see, what do you mean it was dry? If it's inside of a behemoth, it can't be dry. I mean, all mammals are like 80% water or something like that.
But there was no water on it. There was no water on it. I think the moisture of the meat is not a problem. It's not a mashka. It would have to be water.
It would have to be regular water. You
or
mean
any one of the other shiva mashkin, but usually
blood and that's not considered.
We learned a couple of days ago that the only dam that's considered a mashka is dam from the base of shchita, but dam that's absorbed in the meat of the animal that comes out, that's not either considered a mashka. I think we hit our hard cutoff. It's 10-7, so we'll have to stop here. So the next time we learn, it's going to be Chanukah. So the others have a list again, Freilich and Chanukah. The light of Torah should shine and illuminate our hearts and our homes, and the ultraviolet rays from the lights of Hanukkah should burn up all the COVID, and we should have a big Yeshua.
Right.